I was born into a family that wore tradition like armor, rigid, unyielding, and unbreakable. Our house stood in a small Midwestern town where everyone knew their place, and expectations weren't just guidelines, they were rules etched in stone. From a young age, my parents drilled into me the importance of conformity: be the obedient daughter, marry a man of good standing, have children, and keep the family legacy intact. But something inside me refused to be tamed. While my peers dreamt of white picket fences and cookie-cutter lives, I dreamed of open roads, late-night conversations about ideas and passions, and the freedom to decide my own destiny. My heart yearned for independence, not just from the narrow lanes of our community, but from the suffocating expectations of my family. I remember vividly the countless evenings spent in the cramped kitchen, where my mother's voice would rise like thunder, demanding obedience. "You will do as we say," she declared, her eyes flashing with authority. "This is our family's way, and you will honor it." But my spirit rebelled quietly. I wanted to carve a path that was mine alone. I wanted to breathe freely without the shadow of judgment looming over every choice. I began to challenge their rules subtly, choosing different friends, studying subjects they considered frivolous, refusing suitors selected for me. Each act was a spark in a tinderbox, and soon, the storm broke. The first major confrontation came when I announced my plans to move to the city to attend college. My father's face turned pale, a mixture of shock and anger. "You are abandoning your family," he spat. "You will disgrace us all." I pleaded with them, tried to explain that my desire for knowledge and growth was not rejection, but they heard only betrayal. The walls of our home echoed with shouting matches, accusations, and cold silences. The people who once hugged me goodnight now looked through me as if I were a stranger. The final blow came one frigid winter night. After another heated argument, my parents summoned me to the living room. My mother, usually composed, wore a mask of icy resolve. "We have decided," she said, voice void of warmth, "that you are no longer our daughter. Your choices have severed the ties that bound us." The words landed like a hammer. I felt the floor beneath me tremble as if the ground itself rejected me. Tears welled up, but I refused to let them fall. I packed what little I could carry, left behind the only home I had ever known, and stepped into a world that felt both terrifying and strangely promising. Alone, I found shelter in a small apartment shared with strangers and stranger stories. The city was a maze of endless possibilities and harsh realities. Without a degree, without a safety net, I took jobs nobody wanted, waiting tables through endless shifts, scrubbing floors, answering phones. Every paycheck was a victory, every exhausted night a testament to my will. The pain of isolation was a constant companion. I missed the warmth of a family that no longer considered me theirs. But I clung to the fragile hope that one day, I would build a life that was mine, built on my own terms. Years passed. I studied at night, took courses online, and slowly climbed out of the shadows of poverty and doubt. The sacrifices were immense. Friends moved on, relationships faltered under the weight of my relentless schedule. I often questioned if it was worth it, if independence was worth the loneliness. Then came the day I signed the papers for a small, modest house on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't much, just a 2-bedroom with peeling paint and a creaky porch, but it was mine. Every nail, every corner bore the mark of my struggle. For the first time, I felt a sense of accomplishment not tied to anyone else's approval. My house was more than a dwelling. It was a fortress of freedom. A symbol of resilience. I imagined a future where I could welcome friends on my own terms, decorate the rooms with my tastes, and wake up knowing I answered only to myself. And for a while, it was enough. But freedom, I soon learned, was a double-edged sword. Owning my own home came with new battles. The quiet evenings I once craved were often filled with doubt and loneliness. Sometimes, when the night pressed heavy, I would stare at the walls and wonder if all the sacrifice was worth it. Would my family ever see me as more than a rebellious daughter? Or had I truly burned every bridge? At work, I faced endless challenges, the subtle glances, the unspoken judgments. "You don't belong here," seemed to echo in the air. Yet, I pushed harder, fueled by a stubborn resolve not to let my past define me. The holidays were the hardest. Each Thanksgiving, Christmas, and birthday was a reminder of the family I had lost. I spent many nights curled up in my living room, the faint hum of traffic outside my window filling the silence left by their absence. Occasionally, I tried to reach out, a text, a call, a tentative invitation to meet. Each attempt was met with cold silence or dismissive responses. The words that once rang loud in my ears, "You are no longer our daughter," haunted me. It was as if they had erased me from their lives. Despite the pain, I clung to the belief that love could bridge the gap. But reality was relentless. I was forced to accept that sometimes, family does not mean loyalty or kindness. Instead, I found strength in small victories, a neighbor's smile, a friend's genuine concern, a quiet moment of peace in my own space. I started volunteering at a local community center, offering my time to others who had also faced hardship. The shared stories, the empathy, and the camaraderie gave me a new kind of family, one built not by blood, but by choice and care. Through these experiences, I began to redefine what family meant to me. It was no longer about ancestral ties or shared history. It was about respect, support, and unconditional acceptance. And slowly, I healed. Yet, beneath the healing was an ember of anger and hurt, a fiery reminder of what was taken from me. Because no amount of independence could erase the scars of rejection, especially when it came from those who were supposed to love me the most. For years, I had lived in the quiet solitude of my chosen life. I had learned to fill the empty spaces with books, music, and the occasional call from a friend who understood what it meant to be cast out. I thought I had escaped the worst of my past, that the family who once rejected me had faded into a distant memory, a closed chapter. But life has a cruel way of reminding us that the past is never truly gone. It was a late spring afternoon when I first saw them arrive, a convoy of cars pulling up slowly to the curb of my small house. My heart tightened in my chest, an old ache stirring, one I thought I had buried deep. My mother was at the front, her face a mask of determined resolve. Behind her, my father, my brother, the golden child, and a crowd of relatives and friends. The air was thick with anticipation, but none of it felt like warmth. They came not as family returning to reconnect, but as invaders with a plan. "We're here to host the wedding," my mother announced before I could even open the door. I blinked, stunned. "The wedding?" "Yes. Your brother's wedding. And your house is the perfect place," she said, voice clipped and unapologetic. I wanted to laugh, or scream. How could they assume such a thing? This was my home, the product of years of sacrifice and struggle. The walls bore my dreams and my pain, every inch soaked with memories of rebuilding from nothing. But they didn't see me. They didn't see me. Their eyes slid past, as if I were just a name on a deed, a box checked off on some family checklist. The invitations had been sent out without a word to me, guests expecting a grand event in a space they believed to be theirs. I could feel the coldness in their smiles, the absence of acknowledgement. It was as if I had never existed in this narrative. I tried to hold my voice steady. "You can't just use my house without asking." My mother's lips curled into a tight smirk. "It's not about asking. It's about what's best for the family." The word family rang hollow in the air, a bitter irony given how I'd been cast out. As preparations began, tables, decorations, caterers, my sense of violation grew. Strangers wandered my living room, laughing and chatting as if they owned the space. Friends and neighbors approached, congratulating my brother but ignoring me altogether. I was invisible. And it was the cruelest kind of hurt. I stood in the corner of my own living room, watching the scene unfold like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, the cheerful chatter, all of it felt like a cruel mockery. My home was transformed into a stage for a celebration that erased my presence. My brother, dressed sharply in a suit tailored for the occasion, barely glanced in my direction. He was the favored son, the one who had stayed in line, who had never dared to challenge the family's expectations. His smile was bright, but it didn't reach his eyes. I wanted to scream, to demand recognition, to remind them all that this was my house, my hard-earned sanctuary. But the words caught in my throat. The weight of years of rejection pressed down, silencing me. And then, when I finally found the courage to say no, to stand up for myself, my mother exploded. "This is our family's house," she shouted, her voice ringing through the room, sharp and accusatory. "You think because your name is on some papers you can just throw us out? This is where you belong, with your family." Her words were venomous, laced with entitlement. The crowd fell silent, eyes flicking between us. Some nodded in agreement, others averted their gaze, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. I felt my heart pounding, rage bubbling beneath the surface. Legally, this is my home. I paid for it. I built it. You have no right to treat me like a stranger in my own house. The tension was suffocating. My mother's face twisted with fury, and she spat out, "You don't belong here. You never did." That night, everything I had fought for, my independence, my dignity, felt under siege. But I refused to back down. I called the police, my hands shaking as I explained the situation. When the officers arrived, they listened, verified the ownership, and firmly asked my family to leave. The retreat was begrudging, filled with angry glares and bitter words, but I watched them go with a mix of relief and sorrow. After they left, I sat alone amid the remnants of the chaos, overturned chairs, scattered invitations, and the echo of betrayal. I realized then, in that quiet aftermath, that family isn't just about blood ties. It's about respect, love, and the choice to stand by each other. And sometimes, protecting yourself means standing firm against those who should have been your refuge. The days following the forced eviction were a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, disbelief, and a fierce, growing determination. I realized that the battle for my home was just the beginning. What I was fighting for went far beyond bricks and mortar. It was a fight for my identity, my dignity, and my right to exist on my own terms. My family's betrayal cut deeper than any wound I had ever known. The people who were supposed to protect me, to love me unconditionally, had turned their backs and tried to erase me entirely. But I refused to be invisible. One afternoon, as I sat at my kitchen table nursing a cup of cold coffee, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother, terse, commanding. "We need to talk. It's about the house." My heart raced. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend that the past was buried. But another part, the part that still longed for connection, compelled me to respond. I agreed to meet at a nearby cafe, neutral ground. When I arrived, the tension was palpable. My mother sat stiffly in a corner booth, her eyes sharp and unyielding. My father was there too, his face unreadable. My mother wasted no time. "We're not asking anymore. We're telling you. The house belongs to the family, and we will not let you keep it." I shook my head, fighting back tears. "Mom, legally, it's mine. You can't just take it." She scoffed. "The law doesn't mean anything when it comes to family. You're being selfish." The word hit me like a slap. Selfish. Was wanting to protect my own home selfish? I struggled to keep my voice calm. Is it selfish to want respect? To want a place where I'm not a stranger in my own life? My father leaned forward. "You're tearing this family apart. You've turned your back on us, and now you expect us to bend to you. I looked them in the eyes and saw only disappointment and anger. But beneath that, a glimmer of fear of losing control. I didn't choose to be cast out, I said softly. You did. I only chose to survive. The conversation spiraled into accusations and blame, each word cutting deeper. I realized then that reason would not bridge this divide. They were anchored to their version of family, one that excluded me. As I left the cafe, a heaviness settled over me. This wasn't just a dispute over property, it was a battle for my soul. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between us simmered beneath every interaction. Phone calls went unanswered. Messages were ignored. The fragile thread that once connected me to my family was stretched to its breaking point. One evening, as twilight painted the sky a bruised purple, I received an unexpected knock on my door. It was my brother. He stood there, hesitant, eyes flickering with uncertainty. For a moment, I thought maybe this was the bridge, an olive branch. But as soon as he spoke, the hope faded. I don't want any trouble, he said, voice low. But you need to let this go. The house, it's tearing the family apart. I swallowed the lump in my throat. It's not tearing the family apart. It's exposing what's already broken. He shifted uncomfortably. Mom and Dad, they're worried. They say you're stubborn. I laughed bitterly. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm stubborn enough to fight for what's mine. He looked away. You don't understand how much they sacrificed for us. How much they gave up. I do understand, I replied, voice steady. But sacrifice isn't a weapon to wield against someone you claim to love. The conversation ended without resolution, but it marked a turning point. The family facade was cracking, revealing a chasm too wide to cross with empty words. Then came the day my mother showed up again, this time with a lawyer in tow, armed with documents and threats of eviction. She stood in my living room, eyes blazing, voice sharp. This isn't personal, she said. It's about what's right for the family. I met her gaze, unflinching. What's right for the family is respect. Honoring each other's boundaries. And that's something you've forgotten. The lawyer's words were cold and calculated, but my resolve was fiercer. I had consulted my own attorney. The law was clear. This house was mine, and I was not giving it up. The battle that ensued was painful, draining, but necessary. Friends and neighbors watched as our family rift played out like a public drama, but I refused to be silenced or pushed aside. Each confrontation steeled me further. Because sometimes, standing up to those who share your blood is the hardest, yet most vital, fight you will ever face. The aftermath of the confrontation left a heavy silence that settled over my life like a thick fog. The storm had passed, but the wreckage remained, a shattered sense of trust, broken bonds, and a home that no longer felt entirely safe. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, wary of who might appear next, what new demands might come knocking at my door. The echoes of my family's words, accusations, threats, dismissals, haunted my every thought. The once comforting walls of my house now felt like battlegrounds. Every creak of the floor, every knock on the door, sent my heart racing. It was as if the space I had fought so hard to claim was being contested not just legally, but emotionally. Friends offered support, but they couldn't fully understand the depth of the pain, the sense of being betrayed by those who should have been my strongest allies. The loneliness was suffocating. But I was determined not to let this break me. I immersed myself in work, in community, in anything that offered purpose and distraction. I joined support groups, connected with others who had faced rejection, and slowly began to rebuild a sense of belonging. At times, the weight of the fight pressed down so heavily that I questioned whether it was worth it. Was the price of independence always this high? Yet, with each passing day, I grew stronger. I learned to set boundaries, to say no without guilt, and to prioritize my well-being above all else. Legal battles continued in the background, but I refused to let them consume me entirely. I took up yoga and meditation, practices that helped calm the storm inside. Through it all, one truth became clear: protecting myself was not an act of selfishness but an act of survival. The days turned into months, and the fight took on new shapes. Letters from attorneys, phone calls with lawyers, mediation sessions, all became part of my daily routine. Yet, despite the legal chaos, the most grueling battles were fought in silence, within the chambers of my own heart and mind. Every time I closed my eyes at night, memories of the confrontation haunted me: my mother's furious eyes, my brother's cold indifference, the faces of relatives who once smiled warmly now turned away. The wounds weren't visible, but they cut deeper than any physical scar. There were moments of despair, when the isolation felt unbearable, and I questioned whether reclaiming my independence was worth losing my family. But then I reminded myself of the nights I had spent alone, scared but determined, the days I had worked double shifts just to keep a roof over my head, the dreams I refused to sacrifice. I wasn't just fighting for a house, I was fighting for my right to live without fear, without shame, and without betrayal. Slowly, I began to rebuild my life on my own terms. I redecorated the rooms with colors that soothed my soul. I invited friends over for dinners filled with laughter, creating new memories to replace the old wounds. In therapy, I worked through the layers of grief and anger, learning to forgive, not for their sake, but for mine. Forgiveness freed me from the chains of resentment that threatened to consume me. Through it all, one lesson crystallized: family is not always where you find love and safety. Sometimes, family is the very place you must protect yourself from. I learned to set firm boundaries, emotional and physical. I learned to say no, even when it felt like the hardest word to utter. I learned that self-love isn't selfish, it's essential. Now, when my family tries to contact me, I respond with clarity and strength. I no longer seek their approval or validation. Instead, I hold on to my truth, that I am worthy of respect and belonging, even if it isn't from those who share my blood. This journey has been painful and lonely, but it has made me who I am: resilient, courageous, and fiercely independent. And that is something no one can take away. I used to crave their acceptance, that elusive, fragile thing called family approval. I wanted to be seen, to be loved, to be part of something bigger than myself. But after years of rejection and betrayal, I have come to understand that not all family deserves to be kept. Blood does not guarantee love. Shared history does not ensure respect. Family should be a sanctuary, not a cage. It should be a source of strength, not pain. I have learned to protect myself, to build walls where there were none, and to hold my ground when those who once called me daughter tried to erase me. This house, my home, is more than just a physical space. It is a testament to my journey. A symbol of my resilience and my refusal to be diminished. I have learned to love myself fiercely, to cherish my worth, and to surround myself with those who choose to stand by me. To anyone out there feeling unseen, unheard, or abandoned by their own blood, know this: you are not alone. You are worthy of love and respect. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is to walk away from those who do not see your value. Family is not only those who share your DNA, it is those who choose to love and support you unconditionally. I no longer seek approval from those who refuse to give it. I seek peace. I seek happiness. And above all, I seek to protect the life I have fought so hard to build. Because in the end, the only family I can truly rely on is the one I choose for myself.